Muted. Well, I think in an effort to make the most use of the time that we have here today, we will get things kicked off. My name is Brian Wheat, and you can hear me in the background now. You're looking at the flyer for our webinar, Urban Farming with the Culinary Garden. I am here with John Amato, who is the owner of that business, and we will talk a little bit about his background, how he got involved, and then we'll take a farm tour. We're actually sitting on his porch. You'll see that in just a moment, but we'll take a farm tour and discuss operations and production and then navigating his markets, and then we'll come back to this location on the porch for a bit of a Q&A following that. Just a quick background from where I'm sitting. I'm working now currently with the SBDC, or Small Business Development Center, who is the host of this webinar. We are a program under the SBA, or Small Business Administration, and based at South Carolina State University. And we offer free consulting services for businesses in any stages of their development. And that includes services and marketing, and sometimes technical assistance, and a variety of different aspects of running a successful business. And it is free to those who sign up. And we actually, myself and a couple of my colleagues who are here today, work specifically with agriculture businesses or agribusiness related endeavors, and also businesses that are related to the food system. And so happy to work with anyone or help out following this webinar. If you have further questions or need assistance, you can reach us through the website and the contact listed on this webinar. I also want to point out the fact that this particular webinar is sponsored by the ACRE program, which I will switch my sharing currently and show you a little bit of information on that. Okay, I'll just have to try that again. Why is that not working? Hold shift. Well, there we go. Let's see. I'm not sure if you can see that. I believe that you can. Just to let you know a little bit about the ACRE program. It is a program under the South Carolina Department of Agriculture. ACRE is an acronym for Agribusiness Center for Research and Entrepreneurship, and they provide assistance to entrepreneurial endeavors in the agribusiness world. So if you're starting a farm or have an existing farm and are looking for assistance in business planning or growing that business, and including seeking funding, this is the program for you. There is a fall version of this program coming up, and you are welcome to inquire about that with the contact that I'll share in the chat momentarily. But this is a curriculum-based program that's held in the fall with 3 6-hour courses spread out over 6 weeks, including a pitch day. And you'll receive training in marketing, financial planning, value-added processes, legal requirements, state and federal grant opportunities, and more. And at the culmination of that particular program, you'll have the opportunity to pitch your business for a chance to be awarded one of 5 $5,000 grants. So 5 people will win $5,000 as in seed capital or additional funding for their business. And as a former participant, I can say that the ACRE program is invaluable to those who participate in it. I've found a great network of like-minded people therein, and they do continue to support businesses that have gone through that program. Following the program, I'm thinking maybe 2.5 years ago since I've done that program, and I still talk to folks that are involved in it on a regular basis, and we share best practices and things of the sort. So it really does serve to create an excellent network and provide great opportunity for new businesses. So thank you to the Department of Ag and the Acre Program for helping with this webinar and helping sponsor this webinar. With all that, let us get on to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of today's webinar. I'm sitting here on a lovely day in Charleston, South Carolina, with John Amato, who is the owner of the Culinary Garden, among other things, and has a rich background in food and now agriculture. And so thank you, John, for hosting us in your place today.
Of course.
And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of background. Tell us how you got involved, what you do here, and what we can expect to see today.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So, like you said, my name's John Amato, and I've been a professional chef for the majority of my career. I've been gardening for about 5 years, and over this last year and a half or so, I decided to turn my quarter-acre property on James Island in Charleston into a market farm. And so I'm doing specialty vegetable crops on about 1/8 of an acre, highly intensive gardening, and growing all different kinds of great seasonal vegetables to sell through a CSA, as well as sell to local chefs and restaurants and individuals. Yeah, I got started really because of the pandemic, honestly. I mean, I've been gardening and been passionate about vegetables, all my life, but really once we're in quarantine, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I decided to expand my 6 raised beds that I have into about 2,000 square feet of garden space. I'm also the owner of a restaurant downtown Charleston, so I have an outlet there to sell my vegetables to, as well as some individuals.
And a good understanding of the process, with your background there.
Yeah,
kind of like you know what someone's going to be looking for when you bring vegetables to the table, from your farm to that.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of the stuff that we'll tour today was specifically sown for my restaurant in mind. So certain peppers and eggplant, cherry tomatoes are things that I knew that I could sell and that the restaurant would buy. So I started pretty small, but I started with things that I knew that I had a market for.
That's a smart tip. That's a tip. We'll make notes of those as we go along. So really, the pandemic was sort of the impetus for you making a shift in something you were already doing.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing this as a passion and an interest and wanting to learn and enjoy yourself. And there was a moment where you had enough experience and you started to say to yourself, hey, let's make this, turn this into something different.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that shift took place very recently.
Yeah, I would say last Thanksgiving, I found myself with a pretty significant harvest, and I had no outlet to sell it to, and so I decided to give it away to friends, and a lot of them came back to me and said, hey man, we really like what you're doing, we think you could sell this stuff, we'll buy it from you. And so that's what I did, and my restaurant was one of my first customers, but then I quickly opened an online store and started selling to people in town. So yeah, there was definitely that moment that kind of came up and said, all right, I can start selling this stuff now.
Yeah. And I didn't know until today that you did start an online store early on. So that's something we'll want to talk about a little bit later. I know that's an option that many are looking to pursue if they haven't already right now. But I do want to point out the fact that John doesn't mess around, for lack of a better explanation. It seems and is very evident in the way your farm looks and the way you've organized your program here, that you mean business and that you pay great attention to detail. And so I think that there's a lot for you to offer those who are considering doing this, maybe already doing it and need some tips. And so that's very exciting that we get a chance to talk to you, and part of the reason why I wanted to come to you specifically to host this webinar. I see a quick question in here. Do you suggest growing and then approaching businesses, or approaching businesses to see what a need may be, then growing that. So the question is essentially, do you think about the cart or the horse, and which one comes first, so to speak?
Well, I think the best approach is to have a market, I think, first to sell to. And that could be as simple as having a relationship with somebody, a relationship with a chef, um, or somebody that runs a local store or market, um, or knowing that you have a spot kind of locked in at a farmer's market or something. But I would definitely suggest having confidence and having that relationship first, before just you know going crazy
Or you're going
and
to end
growing
up
a
with a
bunch of
lot of
stuff.
stuff to can for
Yeah,
your personal use,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Um,
But you can start small, and that's what I've done here. I started with one restaurant account, and a few hundred followers on my Instagram page that bought from me through a third party online store, and they were buying every week as regular customers. And I've just continued to expand and expand. And I'm at a point now where I'm, looking to grow outside of this property.
you mentioned briefly, and I think this kind of speaks to the question too, but you mentioned briefly, just you gave some samples to friends, or a test market, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, who gave you honest feedback. I think there's some power in that, um, as you get started. Talk a little bit about that process, like just giving, testing things out in a low risk situation,
Yeah,
to see
absolutely.
what.
So I was, it was low risk for me because at the time I was doing that, giving it away, I was still employed. So we had
Yeah.
an income. My wife also works. So, I didn't go all in right off the bat, so to speak. And that's why I could afford donating stuff, giving it away, testing the market, seeing what people like. And also a practice for me, how I can wash and store a ton of vegetables in my home here in my residence. I didn't have any special equipment or refrigeration or anything to get started, so I would look to harvest and sell, or harvest and distribute, basically all in the same day,
Yeah.
without having to store anything. And it was still small, but yeah, going back to the question, I think that for me, it was just starting with people that I trusted, that I know would give me good feedback. Foodies, people in the restaurant community, chefs and entrepreneurs, and people that I know, buy local, delicious, organic food. And so getting their feedback, and comparing it to what they see at other markets or what they buy from other farmers, in terms of quality and, sizing of things, stuff like
Yeah.
that, was definitely really helpful to
and
get
that
that feedback.
and that's a big one that I think will come up quite often, is quality. Like, that's all in an effort to kind of create the highest level of quality in the product you're getting to folks. And I think, you have to approach that in a few different ways, or, so
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
that's one of the biggest things for me, I think, is quality, and being a chef, for the last 20 years working in kitchens, I'm all about quality, and, keeping things fresh, keeping them at the appropriate temperature, whether it's ripening or whether it's, needs to be um, wrapped a certain way or in cold storage, or dried, what have you. Um, Definitely having a lot of experience with all different types of vegetables and storing them and preparing them in kitchens helped me significantly, kind of to know what I wanted to grow and to know how much of stuff to grow
Yeah.
for people, and storing it as well.
And I will mark this question for later when we come and sit and have a little bit more of a Q&A. But the notion that you have a robust network that you've worked hard to develop over the years of being in the industry, uh, I believe, I want to hear, and I believe that the listeners want to hear too. Um, how can someone go about that process, or how can, how, if they're not already in the restaurant industry, so So keeping that question in mind for when we come back, we can talk about it in a little bit more
Yeah,
depth.
we can talk about it later. But
Yeah.
you're right. It was certainly an advantage to me to have that network already. But I do think that it's very possible, especially starting, on a small scale with a few restaurant accounts or something like that, to build those relationships. And we can get into more specifics on that
On the
later.
house. Yes, excellent. A couple more questions that came down the line. Someone said, I'm actually trying to stay small, so I'm excited to learn more from you, which kind of speaks to that. And then how well is the online store going, and who can I contact to help get me started?
Absolutely. So there are several different online store platforms that farmers can use and are using across the country now. I personally chose Shopify. It was pretty easily, and I did that because it has a delivery system built in, and so it has an app that kind of helps you with your deliveries and optimizes the route. And that's what I wanted to do. Since I am on a residential property, I couldn't have any customers come to my farm. And so everything that I do is delivered to the restaurant or delivered to the home in terms of my CSA. Um, so Shopify is what I use, and I see how well is the online store going. It actually went incredible. I'm in a brief period right now of where I had to pause it because I just couldn't keep up with demand. And I'm fulfilling all of my CSA and restaurant orders right now until I can grow, and then I hope to potentially open that store back up.
Excellent. That's great news. And I hear often that people use Spotify. I know there's some other examples, but Shopify. Yep, I use Spotify too. But and as far as help getting started, I actually would recommend reaching out to myself or someone with the SBDC who can kind of provide you some free assistance there. And then another question here, and then we'll get into the tour. But so do you sell more through your online store as one-time orders, or do you focus on your CSA as a subscription that people get each month?
That's a great question. So actually, when I first started, the first 4 months or so, I was only selling through my online store. I was selling primarily seedlings. Actually, I had a pretty good size seedling program selling specialty seedlings, all kinds of peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, flowers, and so I was delivering seedlings. And at the same time, my own garden was starting to produce, and so I added the produce onto my online store, and I would sell, to those seedling customers or to new customers that were finding me on my online store. So it was a lot of one-off items, but it even surprised me. There were several people that were buying, consistently $50, $60, $70 worth of produce from me each week. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to keep up with that on my scale. So I started offering a CSA into where I can curate the bag myself. And that's been extremely helpful because I don't have any waste now. And I can kind of put more seasonal products in the bag that, I know are at their peak rather than maybe somebody wants a bunch of lettuce or something, but it's the middle of July and etc. So yeah, the CSA model is working really good for me right now on this scale.
And how many folks are on this?
So I only have a dozen on my permanent CSA, and then I do some add-ons each week as well, and I still have the restaurant accounts. But I hope to, just on this property, get the CSA up to 20 or 25. But ultimately, I'd like to expand well beyond that.
Excellent. So there are a couple more questions that we will address when we come back for a Q&A. And I think this one could just be quick. Do you just ship locally, not outside South Carolina, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, everything that I do is delivered in Charleston, but one thing that I am working on for the future, which we can talk about later, is doing value-added product that can be shelf-stable and stored online, like different dried herbs or spice blends or pickles, hot sauce, that kind of stuff. I'd love to distribute, nationwide.
Far and wide with that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, and we will talk about the lessons learned in the Q&A part towards the end here. But right now, what we'll do, the chickens are calling us and want us to come out there and say hello. So I'm going to switch formats and use my phone as we take a tour of the garden. So bear with me, folks, just for one moment as I do that. Thank you. All right, here we go. Good work.
Yeah. I need to flip this around, or just looking at us, right?
That's what they can see. I think they can see you now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you'd be in there talking.
Yeah, I can see you. Yep. You just have to unmute. I'm muted here, so you can't hear yourself.
So I'm touring like this.
If you want to do that, or we can flip the camera. Bam. There you go.
Nice.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody can hear me okay?
I believe so, yeah.
So we're here in my backyard. And, you know, on my deck, just some small personal things, some herbs and stuff. But, you know, beyond this fence is really my production area. Just want to point out I have a couple rows of grow bags, really just experimental, to see yield difference, but about 30 tomato plants, sorry, maybe a dozen tomato plants and a dozen pepper plants in this row, all hot peppers. But Charleston, we're definitely in the full swing of tomato season right now. So just some cherry tomato plants, and you can see some cucumbers kind of climbing through here as well, but we're going to go this way.
So John, as we kind of walk through and look at what you have growing here, I'm imagining a few years ago, this was just a yard.
Yep,
right?
It was all grass, just like
so
this.
Tell us about, you know, turning that yard into what you see here. I mean, this is absolutely gorgeous right now. It takes a little time to get to that point, but how'd you get here? How'd you get started on the way?
Sure, absolutely. So I use the deep compost mulch system, and this is all a no dig or no till approach. I drew a lot of inspiration off of people like Charles Dowding in England, who does no dig market. All right, just some technical difficulties there. I think we're back. So as I was saying, yeah, I drew a lot of inspiration from Charles Dowding and the no dig approach. And so I laid cardboard down on a 30-foot by 50-foot area on top of grass in my backyard. And then I got about 20 yards of compost, mixed compost, mushroom compost, some tree and shrub mix, and then some municipal compost, as well as homemade compost. And I laid that on top of the cardboard and let that sit for 3 months without planting, so that it could break down. And then this spring, I sowed a lot of direct crops like arugula and baby greens into these beds just to get something going and get some roots established. And then I flipped those beds into what you see here now. So just want to confirm we're still good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds like it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to walk this way first. And about a quarter to a third of my garden here is kind of experimental and then also personal. And so I do have these artichoke plants here, but I'm not harvesting artichokes yet or putting them in my CSA. It's just kind of more of a test for me to see if I can grow them here. Same thing goes as well with these peppers in all these pots. These were just kind of my backup seedlings that I had left over And so instead of getting rid of them, I just threw them in pots and to see if they would grow. And clearly, you know, we've got lots of fruit. So it's kind of just a bonus for me. Part of my CSA is doing eggs. So I'm expanding my flock, but I have 13 chickens right now, laying hens, all laying hens. And so they have this area back here. Here's their coop. And I also actively compost. And so they help me with that. I use their bedding in my compost. And, you know, I just rotate it manually in the back there. They also feed on a lot of my garden scrap. So it kind of comes full circle. Basically all the plants, as they're finishing, I just pull them and give them to my chickens, and they forage through them and eat them. But
how much are you spending weeding out here, John? It looks nice. It looks like you don't have a whole lot of weeds. I know you laid the cardboard down, and the method that you use is great for preventing weeds, but are you doing much weeding?
I do manual weed right now. I use a wire hoe, and so I use all hand tools. I don't have any kind of or any kind of automatic equipment. And then compost top, flipping beds and
leaving things behind, you know, to reincorporate into soil, to leave organic matter there, and adding compost on top of it. So
yeah, absolutely. So this row right here is primarily beans, different varieties of bush beans, and I have some Italian heirloom beans as well. And about a month ago, this was all zucchini right here. And so after I harvested all my zucchini, I just cut the stem at the base and let the roots decompose in the ground. I top dressed with about another inch of compost on top, and then I just transplanted all of these beans. Still a couple random zucchini down here, but mostly beans. I also have some, I do a lot of intercropping. So right here, you can see mustard greens, which are actually going to be harvested for my CSA this week, but intercropped in here with some pepper plants. And so I'll harvest these, and then the peppers will continue to grow. Those are hot peppers. But coming around here, and as I was saying earlier, my crops for the restaurants, this is a major one for me right here, these peppers and all this basil. Most of this should go down to the restaurant accounts, and I've been harvesting basil for about 6 weeks now, and it's just continuing to grow and provide harvest for me.
What do you think about the size you have here? You've talked before about wanting to expand this. You know, do you feel like this is appropriate? Could you manage individually quite a bit more? What would you say about this size for people who want to get started, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I have put a lot of work in out here, but the size for me is pretty manageable. Currently, I'm only out in the garden for full days on Thursday and Friday, really. And then the other days I'm on daddy duty, and you know, I do some work in between naps and stuff like that. But yeah, this is again about a little less than 2,000 square feet, and once you get it going,
planting out was definitely the most work. But after that, I've chosen things that I know I can grow in this climate. Also variety of things like bush beans, short pepper plants, stuff like that don't require a whole lot of maintenance, staking up, and stuff like that. So, sure. So irrigation, as I kind of move over here towards the my rows of tomatoes, you can see that I have put in some drip lines. I bought everything off of Drip Depot online, and I built this system myself. And so I do a combination of drip irrigation and then overhead sprinklers. So I have dinner. I would say the best time to go in is around between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Kind of before, obviously, service. After lunch, if it's a place that does lunch. But during downtime on a slow day, probably during the week, would be the best time to go. Either early in the morning or maybe that 3 o'clock time frame.
It's hard to find the right time, or there's typically a small window, but it makes a really big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. Chefs are already extremely busy and right now often understaffed, and so they don't want to have to worry about some stranger coming in trying to sell them something.
Right. Yeah, it makes a difference between someone being like, not right now, and sure, come on in and let's talk. Which is the start, could be the start of something.
Absolutely. I would just come ready with samples, drop them off of whatever you feel confident in growing in your program, and then follow up with them. Go back a couple days later and ask them how the samples were, and if you could start incorporating your product into their menu somehow. And really starting with one product, being able to provide that consistently for several weeks. Places aren't changing their menu all the time, every day. So being able to provide a consistent product for them that they can keep on their menu for at least several weeks is definitely a key. And just starting small and picking, locking in a couple of restaurant accounts and, going from there.
Yeah. We've talked before about that, about consistency. You might get an order or get interest, and then 2 weeks later you can't provide that, and then you kind of not sour, but you may jeopardize a relationship with someone if you're not able to deliver consistently. A couple questions coming in here. Thank you all for that. I appreciate it. One from Anna, and it's thanks for showing us your farm and describe your experience. Did you do any specific soil cleaning or preparations when you were first converting your backyard into a backyard farm? So talk about soil health a little bit.
Sure. So again, I just use a deep compost mulch system. And so everything that I have put inputs into my farm has, been put as a top dressing, basically. So I started with that initial 6-inch layer of compost that was a mixture of compost. I did add some rock dust, and I did add some crab and lobster shell, and I also added some ash from my wood oven in my restaurant. So I incorporated those amendments, and I let the compost sit on top of the cardboard and break down. So the veggies out there are really primarily growing in that top 6 inches of compost. But now that the cardboard has broken down, certainly their roots are kind of breaking through into the native soil that's back here. I do as little soil disturbance as possible. I only use hand tools. I'm not tilling anything. And so when it comes time to amend the soil, I'm really just adding more compost.
Just layering it on top.
Yeah, just lay more compost on top. And it helps to mulch. If you use it as a mulch, maybe twice a year in our climate, I would think. Some people do once a year, but we have pretty brutal climate here, especially in the summer. And so compost mulch is the way that I go.
Yeah. And to
even further on that, like the soil cleaning thing, like any yard that's left underneath will actually be regenerated as that cardboard breaks down. So
Exactly.
so you can kind of start fresh on top of the cardboard. You don't have to do anything or worry about what was there before.
Exactly.
And then by the time that cardboard breaks down, then the soil will start to regenerate underneath that. And typically for organic certification, if anybody's interested in that, you'd have to wait 3 years from the last application of anything that was not allowable. So you're looking at similar time frame, maybe a little bit shorter, but the same type of time frame for that soil underneath to be regenerated and to be okay, following planting on top of it. I would say. So that's it. I think I love that method. I think it's great, and I think it's evident out here. You see all of your stuff is lush and you can tell it's in healthy soil and it enjoys it. Another question from Gary is, John, are you the only manpower that runs your farm, or do you employ help?
Great question. So everything that I've done so far has been entirely me. I haven't had any help. I have actually had a few volunteers from my Instagram followers have come out and helped me do some weeding or help me do some transplanting, but that's been a handful of times. And so, everything from sowing the seed, purchasing the seed, to transplanting, keeping up with the beds, harvesting, washing, delivering, social media, managing all the platforms and the licensing and everything. It's all me. But this is the third business that I've opened. I did have a food truck for several years, and I've opened a restaurant as an owner. So I am familiar with the process of getting started in the business side of things. So I'm pretty comfortable with that,
chain, so to speak, right? To manage a lot of things at once.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work, still by myself.
Another question. What's this is from Chris? Thank you. What is the biggest mistake or obstacle that you faced starting your farm? So what the biggest lesson learned?
Oh, that's a great one. Well, I think a lot of people experience the having that outlet, like having that market, having somebody to buy your stuff. Like it's great to be passionate and grow, but you got to be able to sell it at the end of the day if it's a business. Fortunately for me, that wasn't a problem because I was already so well connected in the food community in town. So with that advantage, I would say that my biggest problem, since I do practice all organically, and I try not to spray even organic herbicides or pesticides. I do spray some BT or spinosad every now and again. But managing pests in our climate is probably can be my biggest failure, especially because I'm here in a residential lot and we are surrounded by the woods, and with that comes every pest in the book.
You mean insect pests specifically, or pest and disease?
For me, the bigger pests, insects are fine. They do cause some damage, but I also have a lot of predatory insects. So I typically, if I get the timing right on the crops and grow them when they're meant to be grown, then the insects aren't such a big deal. Definitely flea beetles and stuff like that on eggplant, but if you get the plants well established early on, then they can power right through it without having to do anything, really. So I don't do a lot of spraying and stuff for insects, but my biggest pests are rodents, squirrels, small mammals, birds, the neighborhood cat. All kinds of small animals are my biggest pests for sure. And so managing that takes up quite a bit of my time and trying to prevent that. And, my biggest success in doing that is using barriers, just using mesh bags on fruit, or mesh over top of greens, or netting, or distractions for birds. But that's definitely my biggest failure. I probably have at least 10% crop loss just from small pests, like small animals.
Yeah. How far away from being the old man on the back porch with a 22 are you? Just kidding.
Yeah.
So I also, Gary said to your question about volunteers, he said, can't count on volunteers, you are a beast. So there's a compliment for you. And one of the questions that came from, well, Chris, you also asked, are you certified organic? And no is the answer to that, but in practice, you're using all organic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I'm not officially certified organic with the USDA, but I would love to be one day, and I plan to, as I expand, go through that process. But, you know, my customers, again, I sell to my own restaurant, and I sell to, you know, a dozen families in town. And my customers, through following me, know that I'm practicing with organic methods, and you know, I'm not spraying any synthetic chemicals or anything like that. So
knowing that,
so it's really the trust. You know, I think that's the most important, thing. Being a small farmer is just, you know, the trust and the relationship that you have with your customers.
That's excellent. There's a lot of other farmers that are taking the same approach too. Just kind of depends on who your market is and what the demand,
Exactly.
what they require.
Exactly. If I was to expand to have a market stand in one of our local markets, I would definitely pursue organic certification. I think that it would just be a bonus. You know, it would just be something that would, you know, it's not going to turn anyone away. It certainly will definitely speak to a lot of people that are looking for that organic certification. I think it's important.
And that grows. The
Yeah.
number of people are looking for that's growing. How are you dealing with the neighbors and the chickens? Is the question.
So the chickens are fine. The neighbors are fine with the chickens. I have some of my neighbors already have a few chickens of their own. I'm not in a neighborhood that has a homeowners association or anything like that. So yeah, they do make some noise, but they're no louder than my neighbor's dogs. So it's really not a problem.
Yeah, you have a few.
Yeah, I've got 13 chickens. I don't have any roosters. I might get up to 20 chickens, but you know, they don't make any noise at nighttime or in the evening. It's really just the middle of the day. And it doesn't cause me any problems. I'm far enough away from most of my neighbors where it's a non-issue.
One of the last questions that came through from Lynn is, how do you manage for insects and pathogens, which you kind of touched on a little bit, mentioning, you know, predatory insects and some of your soil health stuff, but any specific things you do there?
Yeah, I mean, so I do spray Bacillus thuringiensis for caterpillars, especially on greens, kale, broccoli, all the brassicas, stuff like that. You know, and it does need direct contact with those chewing insects to work efficiently. But so I do stick up with that. For me, going back to it though, is I try to spend really minimal intervention when it comes to insects. I think that nature is always right. I think that you know, naturally there are those predators out there that will consume the pest insects, and you know, I always, you know, you listen to all different kinds of things, but I think one thing's true is that, you know, at least 95% of all the insects that are out there are either neutral or not harmful to the garden, you know. And so just deterring those chewing insects is the biggest problem. For that, I use BT. And for other insects, I think the best practice is to just grow in the appropriate season. You know, find what crops work, don't have any insect damage. You know, there are some crops that insects just avoid. And so for me, later in the fall, that's a lot of things like chicories and endive and stuff like that, that just the bugs just don't really seem to bother. In the summer, for me, it's, you know, cowpeas. You know, I grow a lot of cowpeas and southern peas, because they just don't seem to really be bothered by insects much. And so
that's companions that you can plant. Like,
yeah, I mean, I do try some of that stuff.
Tomatoes, can't you plant some flowers?
Sure, yeah. People say that marigolds work as a companion planting. Basil also is mentioned.
And I do try some of that. This season I did nasturtium flowers planted with squash. It's supposed to help deter the squash bugs and squash vine borers and stuff like that. Now I harvested pretty early on in the season, so I don't know that there was a problem anyways, but it certainly looked beautiful. And I also harvested a lot of nasturtium flowers to sell to some high-end chefs in town who like to use them as garnish. So that actually worked out really well for me. But so I do some companion planting and the intercropping, but really, for me, I don't dedicate my entire space or even an entire row a lot of times to one crop. I think diversifying the crops that you grow is really helpful with that as well. Not everything is going to be a success, but if you have an issue on one crop and that's your entire crop, it's gone. If you have an issue on one crop but you have 25 crops out there, then you got 24 other ones to still work with. So that's my approach, and I think it's important for the environment that more people take a similar approach.
Yeah, you're creating a healthy environment with a healthy environment.
Yeah,
so healthy crops. We have time for one more question here, and then I'd like to just close things off with getting your contact and everything like that, and let people know how to find you. But the last question I think is perfect to sort of close things out. It kind of falls in line with one I had as well. This is from Gary. Says, is this perpetually a side hustle, or can a farm like yours be a primary source of income? And my question was, kind of what's the future hold for the culinary garden?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, I do have other sources of income. And so for me, this here is perfect for where I'm at currently. I have a 6-month-old baby. I want to be present. I want to be home more. This is a part-time business for me. I definitely spent a lot of hours getting it going and getting the beds prepared and planting out. But once I did that, I'm only working a couple of days a week full time. And so for me, it's a part-time income, and I think is perfect for somebody that wants to do a part-time farm, maybe do a small market or, maybe a flower farm or something like that. This size scale is perfect for that. But ultimately for me, this was a proof of concept. So I wanted to get the experience first. I wanted to build up a following. I wanted to see what crops were successful and which ones didn't work so well in my climate, and which chefs in town would respond well to it, stuff like that. So this right here is a proof of concept, and ultimately the future of the culinary garden business. There's a lot that I want to do. I am always going to be passionate about offering a curated CSA style program, CSA bag. But I would love to get into the agritourism business, have a farm to table restaurant on a farm, maybe do some UPIC style stuff, have a farm store. That's ultimately where I'd like this to go, as well as develop some value added product that can be shipped, all over the place. But in order to do that, I may partner with some people or take on some investment. But I wanted to make it appetizing, so to speak, to those investors. So I wanted to prove to myself and to people who may be interested in partnering with me that I can grow this stuff, and it is realistic to have an organic farm that does the type of stuff, selling specialty crops on a CSA model like I'm doing. So yeah, great question. This is not my forever plan, but this is happens to work perfectly for where I'm at right now in my personal life and home life. It is providing some small income for us, but ultimately I'd love to see it expand.
Yeah, and it raises an excellent point that is so important to farmers today at any scale is being able to diversify and being able to be flexible and being able to think of other ways that you could be pulling revenue. And it's very difficult to turn strictly produce sales into a living wage. It is not impossible. It's very challenging. You're talking about other unique and diverse sources of revenue. So I think that's a valuable lesson and valuable thought forward. Well, I do want to say that we are a few minutes over here. I'll do that. And so we have so many pieces of technology running. So thank you, John, and apologies to all the folks listening, and John, for the technology not working up to 100%, but hopefully you all gathered quite a bit from this today. Appreciate you having us here. Thanks to the ACRE program for sponsoring this. John, you mentioned your Instagram account. I recommend that anybody goes on and watches the content he produces. It's kind of like today, but very specific to different things that are going on in the farm, and it's also difficult to find resources in South Carolina on people doing this type of thing. People that you watch on YouTube, they're all elsewhere in the country, and there's not a lot going on in South Carolina. So I consider him a really great resource that's specific to our region. So it is your Instagram.
Thank you. Yeah. The Instagram is the Culinary Garden, and there's an underscore in between each word instead of a space. So it's the underscore culinary underscore garden underscore, and it's a little green tomato, and it says the Culinary Garden is the logo. And so follow me on Instagram, because that's where I put up 100% of my content with updates, and I definitely do some farming type stuff, some home gardening type stuff, and I'm pretty busy on there. I'm on there all the time. So
cool. So if someone wants to get in touch, maybe they can reach out.
Yeah, you can definitely direct message me on Instagram. On the Instagram account, that'd be the best way.
Excellent. And if you have any questions about SBDC and the services that we offer, you'll have a follow-up email sent to you, and you can reach out to us via that contact. There'll be a website in there that you can get in touch with any one of us through. So look forward to hearing from you all and seeing you all again. We have a couple other great webinars coming up in the future. We have one on food safety and urban farming as well in the Bamberg area, correct? That's coming up next week. So look to your email for information on that. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
I might ask you to save that video onto your phone, because I started recording again.
Did it record the whole time?
It recorded
or
all until you dropped over here at the initial tethering to this, and but then